These people have walked barefoot for 15 days to have a glimpse of God Vithoba, the Lord of Pandharpur. It is the greatest event of the year in the western Indian state of Maharashtra. Hinduism has a marvelously open understanding of sacred space and sacred time. Lord Shiva lives on top of Mount Kailasa, far to the north beyond the Himalayas. And yet almost any hill or rocky promontory may be called Kailasa and therefore the abode of Shiva. The river Ganga flows from the mountains across the northern plains, and yet almost any stream or river may be called and understood as the Ganga, Mother of Waters. And men and women living today in the Kali Yuga, the worst of all ages, may exchange this profane time for new time, the great time, by entering some recognized sacred space, even if that recognition extends only a few dusty miles across the vast subcontinent. We're going to look at the phenomenon of Hindu pilgrimage, a phenomenon that exists in many of the great religions. It is not obligatory for the Hindu, as it is for the Muslim, to go to Mecca. Rather, in Hinduism, pilgrimage takes the form of a personal vow, or vrata, by which one gains merit and perhaps fulfills a wish. Quite simply, a pilgrimage or yatra is a journey to some known manifestation of power, that place being called a tirtha, a ford. The tirtha may be the bank of a sacred river, as the name suggests, or anything from a hill to a tree or a rock whose story is known perhaps only to a few hundred people, or some great temple site whose myths and festivals are known to hundreds of millions of people. It is in the Mahabharata and the Puranas that the details of the great tirthas of India are told. And one tradition tells us of 7 cities that the Hindu should visit. One of these is Kashi, or Benares, Varanasi as it is known today, the city of Shiva, a city of 1,000 temples. And to the north, Ayodhya, the birthplace of Lord Rama. On the river Jamna is the city of Mathura, the birthplace of Lord Krishna, with Vrindavana close by. And at the gate of the Ganga, where the river comes down from the mountains to the plains, is the ancient city of Maya, known today as Haridwar. Somewhat to the south, the ancient city of Avantika, or modern Ujjain, where a great Shiva temple, Shiva Mahakala, is located. And on the far western promontory here is the city of Dvaraka, where Krishna was king in his later life. Far to the south is the 7th of these great tirthas, the city of Kanchi, or Kanchipuram, where there are Vaishnava and Shaiva and Shakta temples alike. Another tradition has a closer circle of 3 ancient cities, including Kashi, or Benares, and the confluence of three rivers, the Ganga, the Jamna, and the mythical Sarasvati rivers at Prayaga, which the Muslims renamed as Allahabad. And the third of those three is in Bihar, the city of Gaya. Almost all of these cities, until the medieval period, were also goals for Buddhist and Jaina pilgrims as well as Hindus. It was near Gaya, for instance, that the Lord Buddha attained enlightenment. And it is to Gaya, where Lord Vishnu stepped down to earth and left his footprint, that Hindus hope to come to perform ancestral rites, to remove the debts to their ancestors by advancing them to liberation and providing for their welfare in the afterlife. Especially in the dark half of a special month for such rites, one comes to perform offerings at some 54 different stations about and in the city of Gaya. Offerings made by the mystical river Palgu. It is in Prayaga, or Allahabad, that Hindus come to bathe in the confluence of the three sacred rivers. And every 12 years, there occurs the full Kumbh Mela, an astrologically calculated festival that draws between 4 and 5 millions to bathe at the confluence. Partial melas are observed in similar fashion periodically at Hardwar, Nasik, and Ujjain. But it is Kashi, or Benares, that qualifies as India's holiest city and a pilgrimage goal for nearly every Hindu. Hostels in the city accommodate pilgrims from every state and every language region. The first object for the pilgrim is a bath in the most sacred spot along the most sacred river, the Ganga, dipping in the water at one or another of the ghats, the ancient steps. More affluent pilgrims, such as these 3 generations of women from Calcutta, may wish to hire musicians to accompany them from the train or bus station down to the riverside. After visiting the shrines of special importance along the major ghats and seeing the great palaces that survey the wide bend in the river, the major temples of the city are visited, beginning with the renowned temple of Vishvanatha, Lord Shiva, for Benares is the city of Shiva. Negotiating the narrow lanes on foot and perhaps by cycle rickshaw, other temples are visited, and to each the pilgrim takes an offering, a coconut perhaps, some coins, turmeric, red lead powder, garlands of flowers. Coming into the shrine area, the pilgrim gathers himself or herself for the auspicious sight, or darshana, of the murti, the image of the deity, in this case the goddess Durga. The offering is made via the temple or shrine attendant, and the worshiper receives back the leftovers from the meal the deity has enjoyed, these consecrated and treasured remains being the prasada, the grace received from the deity. Like Ganges water, the gift of the goddess, prasada will be taken back home to be shared with friends and family. That is the basic Kashi pilgrimage, but the more ambitious pilgrim may undertake the Panchakrosha, a 5-stage journey all around the city of Kashi. Typically, it is done barefoot, one's bedding and limited food atop the head, only a staff and water pot for extras. Along the way are hundreds of roadside shrines, which receive grains of rice or wheat or small coins tossed by pilgrims. Here, a woman faithfully offers Ganges water to a wayside tree, for pilgrims seem to have an instinctive knowledge of the auspicious sites in every segment of the journey. The city is far on the horizon as pilgrims pass through newly harvested fields. At the major halting places, tents are set up, even markets and entertainments, so that the end of each day's walk takes on the aspect of a fair with snake handlers and wandering singers and musicians competing for the attentions of wearied pilgrims. Beggars seek alms, among them lepers and cripples, or this fellow who seeks coins for his curious cow with a fifth hoof growing from its back. Finally, at the end of the fifth stage of the circumambulation of Kashi, the sacred city is regained, and the pilgrim may bathe in the Ganges with the satisfaction of a meritorious accomplishment behind him. There are many other sacred cities of renown in India, many other sacred river banks with vivid histories, mythologies, festivals. In the south, there is the frequented Tirtha at Tirupati with the temple of Venkateshvara, and Nasik provides a similar focus for pilgrims in western India. If one were to undertake a pilgrimage to the four compass points, one might say to the ends of the earth, there would be in the east Puri with its great temple of Krishna as Jagannatha, and far to the north at Badrinatha, the Vishnu shrine in the mountains. As we have seen, at Dvaraka in the west is one of the 7 great pilgrimage sites, and in the south at Rameshwaram is a Shiva temple on the peninsula that juts towards Sri Lanka. Some great temple towns have pilgrimage traditions that are peculiar to the area only. That is to say that the myths and rites and iconography of the Tirtha are scarcely known outside of that region. As an example of a regional pilgrimage, let us go to the western state of Maharashtra, to an area that would attract pilgrims from one language-speaking area only. It is the beginning of the rainy season, when the crop fields have been plowed and sown, and in all parts of the state of Maharashtra there are assembling the Varkaris, Bhaktas rather, who are devotees of their god and who vow to walk from their homes to see him at certain fixed times each year, worshiping him all the way. They are walking, most of them, barefoot for 15 days or more, covering 100, 200, as much as 300 miles to reach the town of Pandharpur and the temple of god Vithoba. Vithoba is a regional form of Vishnu, more particularly of Lord Krishna, but his mythology and iconography reveal him to be a composite figure of both Vaishnava and Shaiva traditions, with numerous local innovations. Although he is somewhat older than the medieval period, his cult took on significance only in the 14th century with the advent of numerous poet saints in the Bhakti tradition. The pilgrims, like the medieval poet saints, are Marathi speakers, and they assemble in all parts of Maharashtra in processional groups called dindis. These dindis may be the members of a large family, of a caste group, or the followers of a particular guru. The dindis themselves are absorbed into processionals behind the footprints, or padukas, representations of the footprints of one or another medieval saint. These padukas being carried on a palanquin strung from the shoulders of 8 or 10 men, or else carried on a decorated bullock cart. The padukas thus become a portable shrine for pujas, and they are the object of joyfully reverent attention throughout the journey. In fact, as we shall see, darshana of the footprints becomes as important, perhaps more important, than darshana of the deity in Pandharpur, for they represent the ideal of liberation, the moksha of the saints who themselves once walked this way on pilgrimage, but by their perfect devotion became released from this world. The most important of the medieval poet saints was Jnaneshvara, or Jnanadeva, as he is also known, in the early 14th century. His padukas of solid silver are carried the 150 miles from Alandi, where he died, to Pandharpur with more than 20 dindis following. Invisibly, he rides his white horse, with another horse, a brown one, going before as guide. The pilgrims walk each day starting soon after dawn, singing the hymns of praise and adoration composed by the saints long ago. Some are lonely walkers, but most move in their caste communities. By late afternoon, they reach the knight's encampment where the padukas may be worshipped, where the pilgrims crowd in to touch them and take ashes, where one touches the feet and then touches one's forehead afterwards in reverence, and where one may see the white horse of Jnaneshvara as it is stabled in the encampment. The processionals, some 30 or 40 of them, approach Pandharpur day by day from the north, from the west, the south, along the spokes of a great half-wheel toward the Tirtha at the hub, following in the legendary steps of Jnaneshvara, or in the steps of Bhanudas, a 15th century Deshastha Brahmana, or in the steps of Eknath, a 16th century poet, or Tukaram, a 17th century saint, a poor Shudra from Dehu near Pune. Even the untouchable Mahars are represented in the saint Chokha. Chokha, like Jnaneshvara's contemporary Namdev, lived in Pandharpur and therefore does not require a procession to bring him to the town. Varkaris and others on the pilgrimage come from all castes, although the lower caste groups predominate. A remarkable testimony to the power of Pandharpur as a regional tirtha is the presence of both major sects, Shaivas and Vaishnavas, in the Bhakti tradition. In fact, the entire population participates, directly or vicariously, as at least twice yearly a processional is passing through or nearby one's village. And someone in the family or the neighborhood goes to Pandharpur and returns with prasada and all the stories of the event to share. Although caste ranking is apparent in the organization of dindis, a sense of the wholeness of society and the elimination of routine barriers comes with the creation of this temporary religious community. It comes in the joint participation in the effort itself, the suffering, the sacrifices demanded on the long journey. Striking to me as an observer here, as elsewhere on pilgrimages in India, is the evident affection the pilgrimage has for the sacred geography through which he passes. He or she identifies with the territory of the pilgrimage in a mystical but almost tangible way. As one of the songs expresses it, I wish that I could be the little pebbles or the big stones or the dust of the road which leads to Pandharpur. Then I would be under the feet of the saints. The singing of the medieval songs also brings the pilgrims together. The peasants are mostly illiterate, and these hymns of praise are their cherished scriptures composed by people of their own soil. In the encampments along the way, there are folk dramas with well-known themes. Also dancing, some planned, some just spontaneous outbursts of joy and affection for the saints, the God in Pandharpur, the occasion of the journey itself. On the next to the last day, all the processionals joined together at the crossroads of Vakri, 6 miles from the town. More than 500,000 people camp at this site, and they are joined by the people of Pandharpur who come out with ecstatic greetings for the members of their respective processionals. Then on the great day, all walk into the town in one day-long processional, the saints' feet bobbing along in their palanquins. It is important to arrive on the 11th, Ekadashi, of each of the 2 great pilgrimage months during the year, Ashadha and Kartika. They arrive singing, banging cymbals, jumping in rhythm. O you kind and compassionate saints, grant me this favor. Remind God of my existence. Tell him my prayers and yearnings. I am without a Lord. I am destitute and a sinner. Do not drive me away from your feet. If you plead my cause, God will not forget me. And at last, there is the sighting of the temple tower in the middle of the town that lies on a broad curve of the river Bhima, one of the tributaries of the river Krishna. This curve is as sacred to the people of Maharashtra as the curve of the Ganga at Kashi is to pilgrims there. And as at other temple towns, there is a known circuit of shrines for the pilgrim to visit, including a 15-mile semicircle of the town, including here the Vishnupada shrine and the worship of Krishna's footprints and the bath in the river. Only a limited number of the 500,000 pilgrims will actually have darshana of the image of Vitoba on Ekadashi, the auspicious day. The rest must content themselves with the sight of the tower of the temple and visits to the many acolyte shrines. The image itself is a 4-foot black stone figure, Vitoba's 2 arms resting on his hips and his head crowned by a Shivalinga, which is a curious feature for Lord Vishnu. His consort, Rukmini, is in a smaller shrine in the temple compound, and one may also visit shrines of Ganapati, of Maruti, who is the local form of Hanuman, of Annapurna, of Datta, and Mahalakshmi. Here the pilgrims pass a large colony of lepers who ask for alms. They look to the city in the distance and the shrine of Pundarika, and then they queue for darshana, an incredible 10-mile-long line of pilgrims waiting in the sun for the opportunity to visit the temple. As we look across this long and patient single file, about 6 miles here from the temple itself, we can turn and look far to the distance to see just the top of the spire of the temple. And for many, darshana of that temple spire will be the concluding part of their pilgrimage. One may well imagine the splendor of medieval pilgrimages in the florescent period of temple building, and the awe with which the pilgrim first approached these magnificently sculpted dwellings of the gods. The ruins of the temple at Konarak are still a feast for the senses of the pilgrim, even though the great tower over the assembly hall collapsed in ancient times. This is the temple of god Surya, the splendid sun, the entire temple being a great ratha, or chariot of the god, mounted on 10-foot wheels, all like the entire temple faces, elaborately carved from stone. This wheel we have taken as the motif for our series of programs. Konarak is near Puri in Orissa, and also close to the great complex of temples at Bhuvaneshwara, with many of the finest surviving examples of the North Indian Shikhara style from the 8th to the 13th centuries. We have mentioned Rameshwara and the temple built by Rama to house Shiva's linga, this being the main corridor. And we have also mentioned as one of the 7 great tirthas, Kanchi, with its several famous temples, including this one of Shiva, Kailasanatha, built in the 7th century and displaying the Gopura-style gateway typical of Tamil Nadu. Also in Tamil Nadu is the ancient temple city of Tanjore. The pilgrim approaches the great pyramidal-style temple tower through the elaborate Gopura on the eastern side of the temple compound, greets the stone bull Nandin, as this is a Shiva temple, Brihadeshvara, built about 1,000 years ago, and reaches the tower, dazzling in the sun with its 80-ton capstone. The pilgrim enters the dark interior of the cosmic mountain and passes a series of Dvarapalas, guardians of the doors, until finally he gains sight of the Shivalinga itself. There is time then to rest under a courtyard tree or beside the bull Nandin in the shade of his pavilion. We must recall that temples are by no means the only tirthas, that almost any manifestation of the sacred can become a tirtha with stories that are told and retold by the local people. As an illustration, let me tell you of an experience in eastern Uttar Pradesh when I was invited to a betrothal ceremony in a small village about 35 miles from where I lived. I left at dawn to avoid the midday heat, as it was the hot season, June, just before the monsoon rains, and the temperature was about 120 degrees in the shade. When I located my host in the village, I learned that the rite had been postponed, probably for astrological reasons. So I asked about the local sites. Oh, we have a very famous tree about 2 miles from here. And so we set out across total desert in the noonday sun with our heads wrapped in wet towels to cut the hot winds. And eventually we came upon something like an oasis with a white shrine beside an enormous banyan tree. Amazingly, this being no festival or special day, there were some 200 people gathered in the shade of the tree. As soon as we stepped into the shade of this magnificent tree, the temperature seemed to drop about 30 degrees. People were doing various things, one woman wrapping cotton thread 108 times about the banyan trunk in the Savitri Vrata. Oh, I said, relishing the relative comfort of the shade, I can see why this tree is sacred. Oh, no, said my host, this is not the famous tree. And he pointed out into the blistering sun to a rather scrawny imali tree. That is the famous tree over there. And as we walked toward it, I heard the story of the Saint Tapasvari Baba, and how at one time there had been a great sacrifice performed here, a great Vedic rite. But a forest fire threatened it until an ascetic stepped up and commanded his superpowers to destroy the fire. The rite could continue, but the saint himself was consumed and part of the tree under which he stood. I asked when this had occurred, and simultaneously one person said about 80 years ago, and another said in the time of Lord Rama, which would have put the event about 2,000 years before. In any case, this had become a tirtha, and here were hundreds of people in the absolute worst weather of the year, crowded to hear again the story of this saint and to have darshana of the tree to take ashes away from its base. Having looked at so many tirthas, whether local shrines or great temple towns, we must not lose sight of the journey of the pilgrims themselves. We must remember that pilgrimage is above all an individual passage, a spiritual journey that transforms the pilgrim. In the midst of all the outer forms, the road, the bare feet, the flags and tents and symbols and songs, is the inner experience of the pilgrim who participates in, actually relives, the great time of the saints and the gods, and who engages in the space that they have made sacred and eternal, who sees what they saw and hears what they sang as he walks joyfully in the community of those who remember the way.